On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, the Oklahoma City Thunder dropped a game to the Dallas Mavericks last week. Are they the toughest postseason matchup for Oklahoma City? They did get a big win over Cleveland. We're going to preview this week ahead as well and discuss future playoff opponents.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO Thunderpod. Email the show, lothunderpod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're diving into the Oklahoma City Thunder's potential playoff opponents. What will the Thunder be successful against? Who will the Thunder have a little bit of trouble with? We'll also recap the week that was and preview the week ahead with our good pal Michael Martin from Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube and Michael on Sports on Twitter. Michael, it was an interesting week. The Thunder got a big win over the Cavs whenever the Thunder had no bigs, and then dropped the game to Dallas, and then, of course, last night dominate the Brooklyn Nets. How you feeling after the week that was?
More good than bad. I mean, this is something we've talked about before with how the Thunder lost to the Rockets earlier. It's more concerning about the team that they lost to, or more disappointing, but there are going to be weird losses throughout the season, and nobody could have expected it could be one of these games where Shai's going to be out. I think that it was sort of some weird circumstances, but still disappointing. But overall, I think that the Cavs win is more important in the grand scheme of things.
I mean, the Cavs win was certainly impressive. You know, you go into that game, and I picked the Cavs to win. I thought the Cavs would get a big win. I picked the Thunder to win Friday, so I was 0 for 2 on the back-to-back set. But, the Cavs win was just really impressive to see them dictate the way that game was played and really force Cleveland to go small. And obviously, if you get the opposition to go small with the Thunder have mastered that small ball style, and the Thunder ran away with that game big time. But the Dallas Mavericks, of course, always are going to create this animosity and friction between the two fan bases. And whenever they play on the court, they also have a little dust up every 3 minutes, it felt like, during that game down in Dallas. First and foremost, with Shai being out, his first game missed, and to this point, only game missed of the year, J-Dub had to be elevated to that number one option. What did you see from J-Dub?
I'd say I was disappointed. I felt like there was a real opportunity. Again, it's a one-game sample size, so we can't just say this is the bookend of all things, but I was expecting a little bit more aggressiveness, a little bit more physicality, but, if he turns out to be a guy who maxes out as a number 2 or maybe even a number 3 on a team like this where you have Shai and Chet, I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think that there were sort of, we're part of the problem with this, unrealistic expectations put on Dub just because he caught fire when he ran onto the scene immediately as a rookie. And sometimes that trajectory that we put guys on, it's not going to just be, it's not just going to go up and up and up. There's going to be some bumps and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game that, to be frank, for the Thunder to get where they want to go, they can't have J-Dub as the top option. And he's still in year 3. Like, there's a chance that he can evolve and he can grow into a guy who is capable of being a number one option. It's not right now. It's not this season. And on this team, I'm not really sure what option he is. He's for sure top 3, but when Chet comes back, we saw a unique ability from Chet at the start of the season to create his own shot. We know that he's going to be able to be spoon-fed buckets from each Shai and J-Dub in the pick and roll, in the pick and pop, to where we don't really know how it's going to level off. But ultimately, as far as J-Dub goes, when you're looking at his minutes against Dallas, I would have liked to see him have a tighter handle. That's something that I believe he can grow, and I believe he can develop that. I don't think he'll have a bad handle forever. This is a guy who has played point guard in his past at a high level. He'll be able to maneuver that. I would have liked to see him maximize his strength more. There was a couple possessions where, on a smaller defender, he was able to get them into the post like Kyrie Irving and just didn't go to it enough for my liking to get down deep into the paint. And then the only real troubling concern for that game was the amount of times that he couldn't get past Maxi Kleber. I think that part of that, though, is just learning his body again, because this is a guy who's continuously hit growth spurts throughout his life, really. I mean, you look at where he was in high school. He shot up twice in college. Now in the NBA, it's not necessarily the height that shot up, but the mass that has shot up, where it's putting on all this muscle. Like, he's got to get used to how everything works in that department. And then the handle. Once he improves the handle, he'll be able to get past matchups like Maxi Kleber. So I know that it was a big point of concern after that Mavs game, but long term, I don't think there's really any concern here, because he either will or he won't develop to that level. And for this Thunder team, he doesn't have to develop to that level for them to be successful. It's really going to be put on Shai, and even more so on Chet whenever this team is fully healthy and fully rocking and rolling. But there was PJ Washington antics that follow PJ, that follow this rivalry. What did you make of the PJ, the Dort, the dust-ups, all the extracurricular?
Felt like a bunch of nothing. I mean, these are two teams who have a lot of history together, and this is just typically what happens, where you get to know people game in and game out, where you're going to get really familiar and little things get on each other's nerves. You know, PJ, I thought it was a bit much standing over one of the Thunder players. That just seemed like just no reason for that. I thought the foul was a little bit out of line, but I don't think that it was super, super intentional. I think it was a little bit reckless, but I don't think I don't think PJ, either of those guys are dirty players. We talked about this the other day in person and media dining. Just like, there's not a big enough sample size with either of these guys that says that they're a dirty player, and I don't think that's the way it is. But, you know, there's just always going to be some extra juice between these two teams, and the fans and just everything around that is just going to amplify it to another level. But I don't think this is a massive deal.
Yeah, I had a rant about it after the game on Friday. You can go listen to, but I think it's a big nothing burger. I think that we can't continue to clamor for these guys to try harder in the regular season, for these games to matter, for rivalries. And then when the rivalries get here, then clutch our pearls about how this was a dirty play, that's a dirty play, he's a dirty player. And none of it was dirty to me. It was just good, clean, old-fashioned hate. It was clean, old-fashioned effort out there. Even the J. Will thing, it's unfortunate that it happened. I'm glad J. Will's okay. But the intent behind that was not dirty in any capacity. You have to look at what leads to that event. Whenever you see J. Will in that third quarter, he drew 2 offensive fouls, which stopped Dallas possessions clearly and led to points, because he hit 2 3-pointers. He had a dunk before that. This is a guy who's really getting going. And so PJ in recovery was trying to make a play. It ended up clobbering J. Will on the head, and it was a scary fall. But it was just from the standpoint of trying to provide that defense and stop the momentum that had swung back to Oklahoma City in that third quarter. I love it. I love the intensity that these two teams play with, because what you're seeing, in my opinion, from Friday is that this is a genuine rivalry. And the NBA does not have very many, if any, of these rivalries. There's some rivalries between player versus player, player fan bases versus player fan bases. But no matter who's in or out, these guys are going to go all out against each other. These guys are going to play at an exceptionally high level against one another. There was no Luka, there was no Shai, there was no Lively, and there was no love lost between these two teams. And that's what you like to see through the course of this game. And we get another look at it this week, only this time in Oklahoma City, which we're going to get to here coming up. Are the Mavericks the most difficult playoff opponent for the Thunder to deal with? Who among this current group in the West and in the East are going to give the Thunder the most problems? And who do we not really worry about when it comes to Oklahoma City? That's all coming up. But first, I want to say right now, but our good friends over at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and it has a variety of bets to keep the games exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. Go visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. And make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If you only love the NBA, though, they also have NBA lines, which you can bet on, like the Chicago Bulls heading into Intuit Dome playing the Clippers. The Bulls, 6.5-point underdogs on the road. Go check that out at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Joined today by Michael Martin. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube, at Michael on Sports on Twitter. Michael, the Mavericks and the Thunder. To me, we haven't even gotten a sample size of any of what these two teams will be at the end of the day. Whenever you have a full complement of players for either side, got to see how Luka, Lively, and that fully healthy Mavericks team, which they've played very few games healthy. The Thunder played no games healthy this season. We don't really know how it'll look, but to me, the Mavericks are still the biggest threat to Oklahoma City out west. I'd have them number one in terms of who the Thunder would love to avoid. And it's not that the Thunder can't beat them. I think the Thunder are capable of beating anybody in a series. That's how great this team has been this year. But as far as who poses them the biggest threat, that it can go to 6, it can go to 7. And once you get there, once you get a series to 7, favorites or not favorites, anyone can win in that 7th game. So I have the Mavericks number one, but are you in agreement with that? Do you think that the tide has turned with this Thunder and Mavericks, kind of setup of their rosters? Because Andrew Schlecht on Down the Dunk today, I was on there talking about possible playoff matchups, and I expressed these concerns over Dallas today. Andrew said, and I quote, "The Thunder will smoke the Mavericks," which I could not disagree with more.
Yeah, I'd also disagree with our good friend Andrew Schlecht about that. I think that Dallas is number one with a bullet in the West. I think that the Thunder are more talented and they have a better team, and I would pick them to win in a series. But I think it would still be knockout, drag-out fight. And like you mentioned, the Thunder aren't scared of playing this team. The only thing I would be scared of is the fact that, when you go through a series like this, you are going to come out with some real scars and some real wounds and some real mileage that could cost you in the next series. I think it probably did hurt the Mavs a lot by the time they got to the finals, just that overall series against the Thunder last year. And I think something similar could happen to OKC this year. But with the Mavericks, Kyrie is a really great late game player who can create shots against anybody, even a great Thunder defense like this. Luka historically is one of the greater playoff performers that we've seen, just averages, and he's a guy who can really go toe-to-toe with anyone in any single game and win you a game. I think that I trust the glue guys and the role players less for this Mavericks team, and I think that Hartenstein and Chet are going to make the massive difference, because the one time we saw Hartenstein play, it was a really, really big difference with him and Caruso when they won that in-season tournament, or the NBA Cup game to qualify. And then for Chet, we know what he can bring to the table, and I think him not being beat around, knocked over on the boards by Lively and Gafford and Hartenstein instead would be really, really good. But I'm right there with you in terms of, I would say Dallas is number one with a bullet.
Yeah, I would still pick the Thunder to win a series over Dallas fully healthy. Yeah. It's just all those factors that you mentioned. The fact that I fully believe Luka Doncic is a player that you could put him up against anybody. The Harlem Globetrotters, the Thunder, you can put him up against those KD Warrior teams. He's going to win 2 games. He's going to be that good. He's that talented in the playoffs. He's going to win you 2 games. So you've already shaved off 2 of the 4 you have to win a series. And then, it would be silly at this point to not expect PJ Washington to win them another game. And that's 3 of the 4 games that you have to win. So therefore, smoking them is out of the question, because to me, if you smoke a team, it's a gentleman's sweep or an actual sweep. That's smoking a team. Yeah. And so that's kind of out of the picture now. And when you look at PJ specifically, he's been really good against the Thunder. I thought he was really good on Friday. He didn't do anything out of the ordinary, though. He just had a standard PJ Washington game. But you have to look at the context of it. To me, that's not figuring out PJ Washington. That's not kind of covering him any differently. He still was matched up with Wiggins, which is where he found most of his success. When you look at this Mavericks team fully healthy, though, who does your attention go to? Your attention is still going to be with the Lively spoon-fed buckets, even though you're a lot bigger now and you're not having to kind of swarm the paint as much. You still swarm the paint plenty with this Thunder system. But you got to watch out for the roles with Lively and Gafford, because they have such talented guards. You have to give all your attention to Luka. Kyrie needs attention as well, which J-Dub does an excellent job of handling that matchup one-on-one for as much as you can, and only needing a little bit of help. But still, you've now talked about 3 guys before you even get to PJ. So he's going to have open opportunities, and he relishes in that. And if he has another series like he had last year, he's going to win you a game with an outlier shooting night. So therefore, this is going to be a 6-7 game series. And I don't think very many teams will push this Thunder team to a 7th game. And I think Dallas could, but I would still pick the Thunder to win, because you look at that series from a year ago. And while it's great that Dallas won, and you can't take anything away from that victory for Dallas, clearly goes without saying that was the Thunder's young first experience in the playoffs. But also, the kind of spacing was awful when Josh Giddey was on the floor. They played him off the floor, and there's not a guy you can play off the floor on this Thunder team. And then it was a series that went 6 games with a 0-point differential. And if you look at Chet's on-off in that series, like they lost that series when Chet was not on the floor. Mm-hmm. And why did they lose that game without Chet? They didn't have a single center. All due respect to Jay Will, all due respect to everyone, did not have a single center besides Chet. Now you can match the Mavs center for center. They have 2 really good centers to put up numbers. Now so do you. And so in a series that was already so close with all those negative factors for the Thunder, I think it swings in the Thunder's favor if these 2 teams get to play again fully healthy. And from an NBA's perspective, the league should do everything in its power. Like if you believe the league is rigged or whatever, it should do everything in its power to get this matchup, because it would just be must-see TV. It would be drama. It would be everything for this league. But that's why I think that they're the biggest threat in the West, because with everyone else, you really have to squint to find a path for them to take the Thunder to 7. And I still think the Thunder would beat everybody in the West. I think that they're going to go to the finals, but that's just the toughest route.
Yeah, I agree. I think that also helps that we've seen more, and who knows when Chet comes back what the starting lineup's going to be like. But you mentioned J-Dub guarding Kyrie, and a lot of those games it was Kaysen instead and putting Lou Dort on Luka, and I think that's really a good blueprint for this team to give J-Dub some extra time guarding a guy like PJ Washington, which I think would really, really help the Thunder's defense as well. But I think the closest thing, because like you said, we haven't seen both these teams healthy, but the Hartenstein game with Caruso in the NBA Cup, I think was the closest thing to a preview we've gotten in terms of the Thunder's game plan, which was just anybody but Luka. They just double-teamed the ball out of his hands at all times, and they just said, Kyrie, knock yourself out trying to create, get the ball moving, and they just basically stalled out Luka, where he's just standing out at half court for most of the time. And that's not always going to work. I mean, Luka's going to be more engaged in a playoff setting. But to your point about the Mavericks, like, the Thunder have a great home court advantage. If there are 2 guys in the West who just don't care about that, it would be Kyrie and Luka. So they can step in and win in any environment. But I'm right there with you in thinking that the Thunder would win this series, but it's not going to be a blowout or anything. If they did manage to win in like 5, I think it would just come down to the Thunder just overwhelming them with shooting and defense and things like that, which could happen, but I'm just a staunch believer in what we've seen from the Mavs, even if it has been sort of slow this season.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of context behind the Mavs record. You saw like Thunder fans taking victory laps about like, oh, this was their Super Bowl or whatever. Their record's only that way because they're injured. Like whenever they were healthy and put together, they were a top 4 seed in the West. They were hunting for that 2nd seed. Like they're a really, really, really good team. So don't get caught up in like the overall record. If the Thunder can avoid the Mavericks in this playoffs, I think that they really cruise their way to the West Finals and then cruise their way to the finals as much as you can cruise. Clearly, the playoffs are a different beast, and it's going to be difficult. Every route to the playoffs is difficult, even though the heavily criticized routes like what Boston took a year ago, like what Denver got to deal with a couple of years ago, that those are still difficult to get past. The Thunder will see the same thing. But you go down the list, and my number 2 team for who I would least like the Thunder to see is a toss-up. But, well, it's a toss-up because we haven't seen Memphis yet. I think that if you got to see this fully healthy Thunder team against this fully healthy Memphis team, there's a lot of interesting battles that I think could make the game a rock fight. And it could make the game difficult for the Thunder. Not that they lose, though. Like the Mavericks are really the only team I think I could see myself saying that they might lose a series to them. Because Memphis could mess up a game and muddy it up. And then my second team for that second spot, which I would put the Denver Nuggets at number 2, even though I love this Memphis team fully healthy. I'd put Denver at number 2 because it's a star-driven league, and stars in the playoffs win, and they have the best player in the world. 1A, 1B with Shai, whatever you want to call it. Jokic is the best player in the world. So that in and of itself can really carry you, but their lack of depth and all the flaws that Denver has would of course make you feel pretty good. And that's the kind of illustration here, is that there's even the best scenarios in the West, the Thunder are still head and shoulders above everybody.
Yeah, to a degree. You mentioned the Celtics path last year. If they don't play the Mavs, I think it would be pretty similar to that Celtics path for the Thunder. And I'm right there with you. I'll take Memphis 2 and then Denver 3. Memphis, like you mentioned, we haven't seen them fully healthy, and at this point they're sort of like the Thunder, where it's just an abstract concept of them being fully healthy, but they have a lot of talent. They're super athletic. They're really gritty. They're really smart. They play the right way. They're schematically really, really good with Taylor Jenkins in the helm. They have shot blocking. They have shooting. They have a lot of those things that could muddy up a series and make it really interesting. But I think at the end of the day, the star power for the Thunder in terms of Shai being better than Ja, Chet being better than Triple J. I would expect JW to be better than Desmond Bane, and I think that would be a super, super interesting series that would make the Thunder work, but they'd come out with a win. And then to your point about Denver, I'm right there with you in the sense that, like, Jokic is the best player in the world. You mentioned Luka can get you 2 games. I'm sure Jokic can too, just by himself. But the depth is the major concern, and you mentioned those on-off numbers for Chet against the Mavericks. Those would look, I don't know, elementary to what we would see with Jokic against the Thunder and his on-off numbers whenever they put DeAndre Jordan on the floor, and especially against this Thunder team, which now with Hartenstein and Chet, hypothetically, knock on wood, that they're both going to be healthy, can put 48 minutes of top 15 center play on the floor at all times, along with having Shai and all the other depth across this roster. So I think that Jokic would be a problem in himself, but the rest of the roster for the Nuggets just don't really concern me.
Yeah, I think that the reason I have Denver 2 is because of Jokic being the best player. We saw a year ago the on-off numbers with Chet. They still pushed the series to 6 with all that was difficult for the Thunder and all the adversity that they had to go through. And then the rest factor, he's going to lose you some games in the playoffs because he's going to be too emotional. We've seen that in Oklahoma City, but he's also going to win you some games. And I think that, like, if he had to come play in Oklahoma City for a playoff game, that first playoff game back in Oklahoma City, he could just light it on fire and just win them a game at the end. Maybe that's too much credit to Russ, but he could win them a series. And then with Memphis, the reason I'm so high on them is because they have Ja, and then they have a really good roster. Jalen Wells is really good. I think that his game translates to the playoffs. I love Jaren Jackson Jr., love Desmond Bane. And their formula, right? What's given the Thunder trouble? It's packing the paint and having solid enough to above average to elite perimeter defenders to where if you can navigate through Desmond Bane and you can navigate through Jalen Wells and you can navigate through these guys that Memphis can throw at you, guess what? You're met with Edey, you're met with Jaren Jackson Jr. at the rim, and that makes life really difficult. They play a very physical style of basketball. J-Dub specifically doesn't handle that well offensively. So then you really – that's the only really team in the West that can duplicate that formula consistently to make life hard on J-Dub offensively. Once he's hard offensively, then – you're scrapping a little bit. It comes down to 3-point shooting. It comes down to these role players stepping up. And while they're all capable of stepping up, we've also seen in big games that they don't have it every single night. They're not the most consistent group of role players for as talented as they are. And so that series could go longer than anticipated, but I still think the Thunder would win. I'm really not trying to drink the Kool-Aid, as Mark would say, but and I have a drop for that coming up pretty soon, trying to figure out how to upload that to the soundboard. But I just don't know who I would ever pick in the West against the Thunder. Dallas is my number one. I could see them losing that one. I can't really see them fully losing a series, though, to anybody else.
No, I'm in the same boat. I think with the Grizzlies, what would end up chipping away at them is just the three-headed monster of defenders with Caruso, Caruso, Wallace, and Dort, of those guys for just 48 minutes every single night, where you can't really wear those guys down. And even J-Dub would be on him for a little bit to give him extra size and a little bit of just a change-up. But with the Grizzlies, all those points that you made are true, but I just think in the grand scheme of things, the pace would be too much for that team, especially with their bigs to keep up with. Jaren Jackson Jr., really good rim protector, gets in foul trouble all the time. Shai is going to get him 3 fouls in a game. Multiple games, I would probably imagine. And then Zach Edey, I just don't think he can keep pace with Chet or even really Hartenstein on all these plays. And the Thunder, that could be the team that we see the Thunder go with the change-up pitch in the playoffs and just go, we're going super small, and we don't think you can keep up with us. And I think that would be a really, really big issue for Memphis. But like you said with Memphis and Dallas, the comparison, they are the most likely team to really just make it just ugly and muddy with a guy like Marcus Smart defending Shai and just super physical and get into those emotional things that we see with the Mavs and sort of get the Thunder out of their game. But the Thunder are so talented that I would also be surprised if they dropped that one.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like a Thunder homer, but you just go down the list and you stop me whenever you disagree. The Rockets have no chance to beat the Thunder in a playoff series. I mean, their defense is excellent. They could steal a game or two. They don't have that top-tier scorer that you have to have in the playoffs to have success. As of right now, they just don't have that guy. And then Memphis and Denver, we've discussed. The Clippers, I mean, if they're fully healthy and they got 7 games out of Kawhi, that they can really push things, but not enough to win, in my opinion. The Lakers, they have the best player to ever play the game in LeBron. They have AD, but the Thunder have the better talent overall. They have the talent advantage clearly. We've talked about Dallas. Minnesota has been an absolute mess this season, and they don't really have an identity. And I think Anthony Edwards is too easy to take away right now. I mean, you hear about him complaining about double teams and everything. Good luck in a 7-game series against the Thunder's defenders. He's going to have games in that series if they matched up where he'd be elite, but he's also going to have games where he'd be really taken away, a non-factor, all things considered. The Kings have zero chance. The Suns have zero chance. The Warriors have Steph, and that's going to give you PTSD, but they can't beat the Thunder in a series. We're not talking single games here. And then the Spurs. I mean, the Spurs would be the storybook series if that was a first-round series out of the play-in. You have Victor and Chet, and you have Chris Paul and Shai. I would love it. I hope that we get that both for the storylines and for travel purposes, because we can just drive down to San Antonio. But they can't upset the Thunder. The only teams that I think can really beat the Thunder, and I wouldn't even pick them to do it, but they can do it, would be Dallas, Denver, and Memphis. And I just don't see it happening. I think that the biggest competitions are in the East, and you don't face those guys unless you make the NBA Finals, which would be already a success story.
Yeah, Phoenix is the only team, and I've been really, really down on them, but just the idea of what they did to Denver a few years ago, where they won 2 or 3 games just off the back of Booker and Durant going nuclear, which I think could be a real thing even against the Thunder, because those guys, like, you can play good defense on them, and it doesn't matter a lot of times. And there could be a situation where J-Dub, has a down series, and it's just sort of Shai and Committee versus those two, and they could outscore them. But I'm right there with you in the sense of, like, it's the East, and then it's the Thunder after that, and it's just a matter of can you survive, and how much can you survive and get to the finals without a lot of scars and a lot of things like we saw the Celtics with last year.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what this all transpires. And I think that for Phoenix, to your point, if they find a way to get Jimmy Butler with, like, it's obviously going to take a lot of moving parts, but if the sum of the moving parts is just, hey, basically Beal for Butler, then the story changes for me with the Suns, because we've seen Butler, a playoff riser on both ends. And then you have Durant, one of the most prolific scorers ever graced the hardwood, and you have Booker. I still wouldn't pick them to beat the Thunder, but then they'd be elevated to that Memphis category where it's like, yeah, they're not going to win, but man, it's going to be just a dreadful series to get through, where you're just going to have nights where, even for as historically great as the Thunder defense is, it's no shame in not being able to stop these prolific scorers that they're going to have a collection of. Plus, they have Tyus Jones now, who I love. So I just would be curious to see what that looks like post-deadline, which is where we'll probably do this again after the deadline and see where all the chips fall on each team. But the Thunder still have some games to play this week. Let's preview the week ahead and see how the Thunder will fare. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at Prize Picks. Me and Michael have been playing Prize Picks all season because basketball season's heating up, and there's no better way to get money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than with Prize Picks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just looking to have some friendly competition, Prize Picks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 players to get a shot to win 1,000 times your cash. If you think LeBron is going to drop 30 points tonight, hit the more button. Or maybe you think Shai's going to go for 10 assists again, hit the more button on those Prize Pick projections, and let your projections and predictions make you money. Put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. I've been playing Prize Picks all year. It's so fun. Last week, I picked the over on Shai points, the more on Shai points, and the more on Josh Giddey turnovers, and it paid off. So that was really great for Prize Picks. You can even get your money as quick as 15 minutes. It's honestly the best way to keep these games exciting. Now is the perfect time to join. Go download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win. It's just a bonus. Boom, $50 instantly. Guaranteed at Prize Picks. Run your game. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Joining us today is Michael Morton at Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube, at Michael on Sports on social media. Michael, this week that the Thunder have, they've knocked off the scrappy, tanking Nets in a lopsided fashion on Sunday. But coming up, they have the Utah Jazz on Wednesday. The fighting David Locks come to town with Cody Williams. And then the back-to-back set sees them play Dallas at home on Thursday. And then Sunday, they go up to Portland, where they've been able to just dominate Portland so far under this current group. Let's start with the Utah game. Not much there. The Thunder should blow them out no matter who plays, who's in, who's out. It should be another game that we saw on Sunday.
Yeah, as long as Shai is there and in the building and plays for 25 minutes, the Thunder are going to win by around 20. And, this Utah team just lacks a lot of talent, which is why they're tanking to try to go get that talent. So I think we're going to see a similar script to what we saw against the Nets against them.
And then with Thursday, it's really difficult to preview the Mavericks because, for one, they themselves have dealt with guys in and out and who's going to play. But we know more closely with what the Thunder have dealt with. Like J-Dub missed Sunday. What if he's back? Then that changes things. What if he's out? Then that changes things. Hartenstein will be reevaluated on Wednesday. What if he's back? What if he's out? Like, it's just too hard to predict. So let's do it with this way, because here's what we do know. Each side's going to overreact. I don't care who wins. I don't care who plays bad, who plays good, who does play, who doesn't play. You guys in the fan bases of each team overreact to every time these two teams race the hardwood. So that's going to happen. Let me ask you this question. How many dust-ups do we get in this game?
I'll say over under 2.5.
I'll take the under on that. I think it's 2 or less.
Okay.
Where are you at?
I'll take the over just to go against the grain
we can
here.
Track this for next week.
Yeah, we'll have to. But there's definitely going to be some physicality. But you mentioned those injuries. We don't know for Dub and for Hartenstein what it's going to be. But I think this is one that Shai is going to really, really want to play in to make a statement here. I mean, he has avoided that idea of making statements and things, but he's also talked about, we've thought about this loss, whatever, all offseason, this and that, looking at that team and how we felt. I think that Shai, after the last Thunder game when they lost to the Mavericks, is going to be here with a vengeance to sort of set the tone for this team of just, we're not going to get punked, and go out there and just play some really, really high-level basketball and beat the Mavs.
And, it is back-to-back, but you do get the 2 days off on the front end, Monday, today and Tuesday. And then you get the days off Friday and Saturday leading up to that Portland game, so it's kind of manageable there. And it should be another game in which, Shai shouldn't play the fourth quarter against Utah. Whenever he's playing in that game, really nobody should have to play the fourth quarter against Utah. So that helps in terms of managing a back-to-back. The Thunder are 7-1 on the second nights of a back-to-back. The lone loss came to these Dallas Mavericks on Friday, but I still think that this game will not give us any indication. It's not going to stop anyone from taking victory laps. I mean, in the fan bases, but really, we just won't know until the playoffs. It's impossible to, because you're not going to see these two teams play again after Thursday, and there's not going to be Luka, there's not going to be Chet, and then we'll see who else is not going to be there. It's just impossible to know and to get a gauge for what these two teams match up with. And then Portland should be a blowout win in Portland. So minimum, I think we agree, minimum 2 in 1 week. Anything less than 2 in 1 would be the first time this year that the Thunder have really underperformed and really disappointed.
Yeah, I'm going with 3-0. You mentioned Portland. They've blown them out for the last couple of years. I think the same thing's about to happen. Utah, we already explained. And then the Mavericks, you mentioned people are going to overreact. Absolutely. But it is a real... I'm in between it being a real shame that we haven't seen these two teams play fully healthy against each other, and also super interested what that would look like for both teams feeling each other out in a series just from the very beginning in a game one of, we've never seen this. We haven't seen Chet and Hartenstein this entire time. We've seen them against other teams, but this will be the first time we see them against the Mavs, and the Mavs with all their new pieces fully healthy, ideally, and seeing what that would look like. So I'm curious what you think about that, if it's more disappointing that we haven't seen it, or if it adds an extra wrinkle of excitement of potentially seeing that.
Yeah, if you had a crystal ball and you could promise me that they're going to play in the playoffs, I would love it, because it just, as a basketball nerd of trying to dissect what the Thunder are doing, what the Mavericks are doing, looking through we both get in these rabbit holes of the Isaiah Joe stuff that I broke down about how he's getting his threes, all that kind of stuff would be so interesting to have it to where these two teams, yes, they're familiar with one another because they just played a playoff series together, and now they've played 4 times in the regular season, but they're not familiar with each other in reality because they haven't played each other with their full complement of players, to where now it's basically flying blind for the first couple games of the playoff series. How do you kind of evolve that chess match throughout a series? But if we never get to see them play in a playoff series, I'd rather, of course, just see them play fully healthy right now. But we'll see if they get there in the playoffs. My personal route to the NBA Finals, if I was going to chart the course for the Thunder, just for me personally, not who they would dominate or whatever, I'd love to see the Spurs in round one. We talked about the storylines, but also from a selfish standpoint, the travel to San Antonio is very easy. I'd like to see somehow Dallas get up into that 4-5 range, get healthy and make a run at the end of the season. Dallas in round two, again, selfishly, storylines and travel. And then in the Western Conference Finals, either Houston or Memphis because, again, of the travel. But there's also great basketball storylines. But if you could just tell me that like until the finals, you're going to hit San Antonio, Dallas, Memphis, Houston, like I'd sign the dotted line right now because I do not want to have to be going out to California and stuff with how gaudy those prices will be at that time. But Michael, thank you for joining us. Let them know what you're cooking up on Let's Talk Thunder YouTube.
So I recently dropped a video last week about AJ Mitchell and sort of his rise to being a great player off the bench for the Thunder. We all know he's injured right now, but it's just talking about how good he's been this year and then sort of what the Thunder are missing without him until he comes back. And currently what I've got cooking up to drop this week is about Cason Wallace being up next for the Thunder as another great player. I think a lot of people underrate him just because of all the other great young players on this roster, but I've got some interesting quotes, comparisons, stats, and things like that on Cason I think that you'll very much enjoy.
Ready to check that out. That's a good segue to check out yesterday's episode where you broke down the Brooklyn Nets game. A lot of you probably got wrapped up in the football for good reason. So if you haven't dove into that Nets game, go check that out because me and Brian Rabar talked about Cason's high ceiling that sometimes gets overlooked because he's just been so good. I think he's a victim of his own success. Like he's been so good in this role that you don't really even envision him in different capacities, which you should about Cason. Go check out that video from Michael Martin. Again, Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube and Michael on Sports on Twitter. And until tomorrow, be good.